Hello everyone, welcome back to Case Studies with the BizDoc. This week, we're following up on a series we did last week on failures. And this one was a pretty big failure, Theranos. We all know what happened, and I'm going to speed through it very quick, and I'm going to get back to some things that were in the middle of this that you can learn, because the same thing can happen to you that happened to Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. So let's start with a fast run on the history. She drops out of Harvard in 2003 with a vision to do something really innovative and useful. Like, can we not have to take 3, 4, 5 vials of blood? Can we take a small drop of blood and run that through and do multiple tests on that thanks to technology? Could we do that? Could we pull that off? That's a vision. And you know what? That's not a bad vision. I don't like having blood taken. I have friends who are diabetic, don't like pricking their fingers all the time to do their blood sugar analysis. They'd love any type of test that be painless or took less. So it's a good thing. There are things out there, problems that need to be solved, and a very interesting thing that could happen, you know, especially if you could take a small unit out to, you know, remote areas and do testing on people out there to quickly take a drop of blood, find out what's going on. You could go to malaria outbreaks. You could go to so many wonderful things. So this was a noble vision. It was a noble vision. And she, her family, wherever it was, had a very interesting circle of friends that brought her into contact with some people who had a lot of money and a lot of influence, and it wasn't a typical venture capital path. That's the first thing to think about here. It wasn't a typical path. She gets $500K, $500,000, from Tim Draper at DFJ. Tim's a great guy, runs Draper University for entrepreneurs to come learn. There's a wonderful things that go there, and Tim was a believer. From there, though, the track was not really on the venture line, like going to Series A, Series B, Series C with traditional venture capital firms, many of whom do careful diligence. Instead, she gets, a year later, 2005, $5.8 million from Rupert Murdoch. So somehow she gets in front of Rupert. There's a lot of influence and things there. She starts at Harvard, goes to Stanford. Maybe her family's got some connections there. But anyway, she finds herself in the company of some very powerful people that are well beyond the typical venture capital path. That leads to $9.1 million in 2006 from ATA, and then $28.5 million from the Lawrence Ellison Revocable Family Trust, as in Larry Ellison, CEO of Oracle, and just a incredible inventor in his own right. But he's not exactly your typical VC. You can see what's going on. Then surrounds herself with a lot of people, maybe the family knew, Henry Kissinger, Schultz, a general. Suddenly we've got a medical company that's got like a who's who of defense and Secretary of State. Now, if you're running a defense company, maybe making chemicals for the defense industry or testing compounds for maybe battlefield use, I could see that. But where's the medical sciences people on the board? Because peer review and challenge is a cornerstone of medical research. It's what keeps you and I safe, because there's checks and balances and people that come together to look at your work, because this work is going to result in medicines, products, tools that are used on you and me in the field that is healthcare, and it's so much more important to get it right. Well, where were these people? So you're outside the VC path, and she's got a non-med board. I think that was a key that led to what happened a little bit later. Let's continue with the history. So you suddenly now, she's been doing it for several years, and it really starts picking up speed 2010, 2011, 2012. She gets a deal with Walgreens. Walgreens supposedly putting in $50 million. There's a lot of secrecy around this, so who knows what Walgreens really did, but nonetheless, there's an announcement, hey, you're gonna be able to go to Walgreens and take your kid there, and just a little pinprick, do a bunch of blood tests and everything. Again, the noble person's there, except that it wasn't working, and people were starting to ask questions about it, such as lead scientist, a guy named Gibbons, who ended up committing suicide. And there's terrible stories about how Theranos reacted to that and how Elizabeth Holmes reacted to that. Rather than, oh my gosh, we've lost our chief scientist, we've lost this employee, let's reach out to his family, let's come together as a company. The first reaction was from a guy who'd been asking questions and writing emails and had doubts about the technology is get his freaking laptop, get all the confidential information from him, pull that in. Culture of secrecy and has to react that way. They have no choice because they're trying to preserve what turned out to be a myth. And a guy commits suicide under the pressure of it all, and you just have this cold reaction. A lot of articles out there, you can Google on it, but suffice it to say, I think that was a key point that really told a lot of people what the real psychological profile of the management team and how they were reacting. And it was cold and it wasn't right. They were scared deep inside. They're not going to admit it. And they were covering things. So we go forward at this point, 15, according to Crunchbase, $686 million have been raised, and it's a $9 billion valuation. That's right, $9 billion valuation. Damn, that's the only word for that, that you run this thing to a $9 billion valuation with a lot of echoes in the hallways about what is potentially coming on. We go to 2015, and I call this, it's a tale of two cities. The first half of the year, we're burning bright. In March, they got another $348 million invested, supposedly, at that point. In July, the FDA, announces that they're only approving one test, and the test is for herpes. Google, in the middle of this, though, was a little bit of a downer because Google is looking at it. G Ventures, the Google Venture Group, they're very good with statistics. If you ever look around Google, they're really good at measuring things. They're really good at being very scientific and very disciplined. And Google Ventures was like, we want to do some diligence on this. And they weren't getting cooperation from Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes, even though they're coming to them saying, hey, do you want to invest? And they're like, sure, let's do some diligence. Whoa, wait, not so fast. Finally, a guy from Google actually goes to a Walgreens to have a Theranos test, and instead they take a couple vials of blood. And he said, wait, what are you doing? Why aren't we doing the little pinprick? And he discovers something's wrong here. The one drop of blood pinprick story wasn't matching his personal experience. So on his own diligence, Google is no. Then AMA Journal comes out, and they said, there's a culture of secrecy here, and there's no peer review. This is the American Medical Association. This is the association that doctors, hospitals, and the healthcare industry is part of, which is, key to a lot of the research validation. They say this. So there's little cracks in the wall, and the wall falls down in October when the Wall Street Journal, kaboom, writes an article about the challenges. And not just one article, they had follow-up articles. They had 5-6 months of heavy research that they did. Now, Elizabeth Holmes goes on Mad Money, you may remember, and Jim Cramer ultimately says, yes, no, what's the deal here? Let me ask you a question. Does it work or does it not? Yes or no? She gives a 198-word answer, meandering about disgruntled employees and stuff. So suddenly you start listening to Elizabeth Holmes. She sounds more like a politician not wanting to answer questions about her positions on issues. And she was being counseled by David Boies. And David Boies was a lawyer who has a lot of experience around politics and helping people craft answers and defending people. Also comes word that people at Theranos were not allowed to talk to anybody about what they did, and when they mentioned something, such as one guy says he put something innocent on Facebook, boom, got a letter from an attorney. It's like, knock it off, shut up. So what's going on? Just so much secrecy. 2016, the avalanche continues. Arizona, there's fraud suits get filed in Arizona. Vanity Fair puts a very non-flattering article out there, similar to the Journal, diving into the issues that led to the company falling. Because now the story is, what happened? Oh, amazing, 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 9 billion, wham. And even Forbes coming back and saying, we think the value of the company right now is near zero. Nobody can validate the intellectual property. Walgreens files suit, Partner Fund files suit. To the end of 2016, layoffs, and then comes the heavy hit. Elizabeth Holmes gets a 2-year ban against operating a medical testing laboratory. So basically, the cops show up, and the cops are like, stop. This is medicine. This is important to the public trust. This is important to health. By the way, it's never good when the cops show up, whether it's your keg party or it's your business. And basically, that's what happened. The cops showed up and started asking the girls for IDs. And that is the 1,000 times worse moral equivalent that happened here. 2017, Elizabeth Holmes supposedly starts taking some of the stock she has and settling lawsuits. Here, I'll give you more stock, even more stock. I still think there's something here. We've got intellectual property, but I'll give you more stock, not to sue. And I'll give you more stock to sign a mutual release. And so she starts, I call that circling the wagons. Now you've got Forbes and other magazines coming out saying, hey guys, you know, we think this thing is about to run out of money. Well, just recently, they announced that they're attempting to rent or lease their headquarters to somebody else. To me, these sound like things that a good board would be sitting in the background and trying to manage a wind down. Now, who knows if that's going to happen? You know, because here is the issue that I think was core to the company. When you have a big ego about what you're doing, and you have a lot of hubris about what you're doing, you forget that it's okay to fail. Failures are inevitable, and all these people were investing in you, and they're investing in your vision, and it might not work, especially in medical testing where you have 7 years that the FDA's got to review things. There's so many things that go on to protect the public. You might not make it. So they're believing in you, they're investing in a vision, and failure is not something that gets you thrown in prison or arrested. Failure is inevitable when you're building your business and trying to build a product. But when you cling to the thought that you haven't failed and you're trying to sell the story that you've succeeded before you've succeeded, you have no choice but to enter into denial, which leads to comments which turn out to be untrue. And with your ego, you invoke control and you force secrecy and you put the lid on people talking about it. And what happens here? Guess what? Reality and truth die. And you listen to the people that worked at Theranos, that worked with Elizabeth Holmes. That's what happened here. Let's think about Elizabeth for a second and think about the weight she was under. Because remember, she wasn't saying, I'm researching. She was saying, we've pulled it off. It's in Walgreens. We're going to do a deal with Safeway that later fell through. So now for her to come and own up to what's happened, think about the pressure she must have been on. I don't forgive her, and I don't think many people do, for what she did and the things she said and how she conducted herself. But I think that she didn't start out to here, she ended up here. It's what I said a minute ago, and think about this. What does she have to do? She's gotten connected to some very powerful people. What does she say? I'm sorry, Rupert Murdoch, I haven't really pulled it off. It actually is still in research. We've been using other people's machines. I'm sorry, Henry Kissinger. Thanks for defending me when you spoke to the news media. I'm sorry, Tim Draper. Thanks for going on, I think it was CNBC, and telling people that we've defeated the vampires and defending my reputation. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for getting behind it in the beginning. But I haven't really got to where I am. I'm not really there yet. Thank you, Larry Ellison, for all that money you put in. I know you're not really a VC, and we went to your family fund, but I really haven't done it. Look at what she has to undo. When the issue, the wave of pressure that was on her, she couldn't confess, if you think about it that way. Well, she absolutely could. It'd be the honest thing to do. But the pressure to just be in denial and say, I just know we can do it. I just know we can do it. And then I won't have to tell all these people these things because I believe we can pull it off. That's where the hubris and denial lives in here. And by the way, that's what the lead scientist was saying. So I believe that the incredible wave of pressure that was on her, you're on the cover of Forbes, you're on the cover of Fortune, you're being acclaimed as this female entrepreneur, which is a great thing. I want my daughters to look up to amazing female entrepreneurs. I would have loved her to succeed for that reason, so that they have role models in life. Look how high I can go. But when that wave of pressure got too big, I think there was a moment where Elizabeth could not come clean because of this social cost that she would pay to her reputation, to the family, and everybody that made these introductions for her. She was on stage, for crying out loud, at the Clinton Global Initiative. What do you say? Thanks for inviting me, but I need to point something out. What? It doesn't really work yet? What do you say? So I think I'm not cutting her any slack for what happened, but I'm sitting back and kind of paint a picture for you of how you can end up in this situation, and it's wrong. If you just get your denial, your hubris, and all that out of the way and say, I'm an entrepreneur, and I may fail, but I also may end up inventing WD-40 in the process. But if you want to get behind me, get behind me. And here's an interesting stat. In an analysis that was done of venture capitalists of why they invest, 64% of the reason they invest is not the product, not the genius idea, not the market. It's in the team and the leader. That's who they are. 64% of the decision is based on the team and the leader saying, you know what, I think this is a really interesting idea. I think this is a really good market. I think that's a very clever product, the way they take the idea, turn it into a product. And you know what? I think this is the team to do it. That's the girl to do it. That's the guy to do it. That's the woman to do it. That's the man to do it. I think that's incredible when you think about that. That's where venture capitalists put it. Market, product, all that stuff here, and then 64% of it, are these the people to do it? Are these the people to pull it off? So when you think about it, you know, venture capital has a built-in mechanism to filter out. Hang on. So I'll back up a little bit. So rewind a little bit and redo the cut. And here's an interesting tidbit about venture capitalists. 64% of the reason, according to one study, that they invest is based on the team. It's not the great product idea, the interesting market. It is the team. That is an interesting idea, very clever idea, and that is a very meaty market. Wow, there's a need there. And these are just the people to do it. The VCs will believe in the person and then in the product and the market. 64% of the rationale there. So once you've got people believing in you, it's just all the more hard to step out of the shadows and say it hasn't worked. But some of the most mature entrepreneurs out there have been more successful their second company than their failed first company. As a matter of fact, you can go back and take a look at the case study I did on Uber before all the fun started with Travis, and go take a look at the challenges he had at early companies. He actually was part of a couple failures before he built Uber. Now, I'm not excusing all the things that happened to Uber, but I'm pointing out failure, huge success. So it's not a sin to say, you know what? I didn't get there. We didn't make it. But you know what? It's not just her. I know other entrepreneurs where this has happened, where your ego and hubris comes together, and suddenly, whether you're running a small company with $500,000 of total investment, or you've got 686, you have to accept failure and move on. And here's why. Because sometimes there's silver linings. And if you let yourself cling to the original thing and say, this isn't happening, you know, and you go that route, you're going to end up in a bad place. And you're going to lose your reputation. You get disbarred, basically, for a period of time. Well, there can be silver linings. And here's an example. There's an article I really love, and a guy named Sujan Patel, if I'm pronouncing that right, he's a contributor to Forbes, and back in January of 2015, go look this up, he wrote an article about how there were some noble failures in products. They were trying to do this, but they got their ego out of the way, they got denial out of the way, and they answered the question, what do we got at each failure? And he covers a bunch of products that are interesting, such as WD-40, you know, the lubricant, the little can with the red straw, and you can do it everything for a squeaky door to a bicycle. It's got so many different uses, and it is so incredibly beneficial in so many ways. Well, guess what? They were attempting to make a degreaser. In other words, to eliminate grease, which is a lubricant. They're trying to invent something to eliminate that, and the 40th attempt of the formula led to WD-40, which had all these other benefits. So it gets named WD-40 because it was the 40th attempt to make a degreaser that led to some other noble product. There's also bubble wrap, was supposed to be, believe it or not, a wallpaper. Instead, bubble wrap is incredible. It reduces shipping costs, it's a plastic that's completely recyclable, and it protects valuable things so well at very low cost. And we get bubble wrap out of it and so many different things. Again, that was an accident. And we go read the article and you'll see how failure at the hands of inventors that look opportunistically out to the future is not failure. Sometimes you find something else. And there are great, you know, Silicon Valley and other people out there who have had failures, and they just move on to the next company. And they go, hey, we tried. Because if no one tries, there is no invention. So we need to encourage them trying. But if you, again, whether you're doing something for, heck, $5,000 startup in your garage versus $680 million startup, failure isn't failure. Get your ego out of the way. Get people around you that will tell you the truth. And that is the lesson of Theranos. You sit there with a leader in the middle that holds tight and ends up in a culture of secrecy. I don't think Elizabeth Holmes went from her noble thought to do something really great. I don't think she wanted to get here. I think she ended up here because it got bigger and bigger and bigger and worse and worse and worse. Think about it. You remember a time when you were young and maybe you lied to your mom about something as a teenager, and then maybe you called two friends to make sure they told their parents something, so if their parents talked to your mom, you could cover the lie, and then you talked to somebody over here, and then you gave your sister $5 and took her to get a frozen yogurt to get her to shut up and not say it. Guess what? You're stacking on top of it, and when your mom finally figured out what happened, guess what? It was probably worse than if you had just confessed at the beginning and say, "I'm sorry, Mom, I screwed up." And you know what? That happens in companies, and I believe that's what happened here. That's the story this week. And, by the way, by popular demand, the pillow is back. The pillow is back. Please subscribe to Valuetainment, the best channel on the internet for entrepreneurial content to find out about successes, failures, and the skills you need to succeed. Until next time, I'm Tom Ellsworth, and I hope I left you better than I found you. Now, we do need to dispel a rumor. There is no truth that Theranos now has an early warning test from a single drop of blood for hemorrhoids, and they're changing the company name to the anus.